the Vietnam War was going on. There were race riots, and then Kennedy and King assassinations. I never thought I would live to see our president being killed, and Martin Luther King Jr., who I adored. And then when Robert Kennedy, President Kennedy's brother, was killed, that's it. I lost hope. And I wrote to Otto, I said, I don't know why you have so much hope for the world. I have none. I'll never bring a child into a world this cruel. I cannot. And he wrote back this beautiful letter to me and said, Cara, even if you believe the end of the world would be imminent, you still plant a tree today. You cannot give up hope. This man who lost everybody and everything in his life, a Holocaust survivor, is telling me not to give up hope. And then a few months later, for my birthday, I received a card from him, from Otto Frank, that said 2 trees had been planted in my name, from Otto Frank.
Cara Wilson-Granat was taken with Anne Frank's story. Anne Frank, as you'll recall, wrote about her experiences as a young Jewish girl hiding from the Nazis as World War II approached. So when the chance for a Hollywood audition to star in the role of Anne Frank appeared, Cara leapt at the opportunity. She didn't get the role, but she did get a lifelong friend and mentor in Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, and that relationship changed her life. This is a story about the love of stories, about literature, and about how reaching out and following your passion can impact your life's purpose. Cara, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, Pat. And I'm very excited to tell my story. You want me to start with Otto Frank? You want me to start where I started from?
Yeah, please do. It's such a good story.
Okay. Um, many of you know about Anne Frank, and if you don't, a abbreviated version of her is in the Diary of Anne Frank is a very famous book. It was a play, it was a movie, and all of that. It's about a little a teenager, a German teenager in the 30s, and her family. Her sister Margaret, her father, Mr. and Mrs. Frank, were very, very happy, and they were these cultured German Jews. But Otto Frank was more identified as a German. He had been a top-ranking lieutenant in the World War I German army. They had a very comfortable home. He was a banker. They lived a very wonderful life in Frankfurt, Germany, and they were very happy. And they had wide circle of friends. But at the time, a chancellor, a very evil man named Adolf Hitler, was taking over, becoming this dictator. And what he did is, what dictators can do is they can basically target in on the fear, and the frustration of the German people at the time. They had lost World War I, and they were starving, they were hungry, and there were bread lines, and they were out of work, and it was a desperate time for them. So this man, Hitler, and his Gestapo targeted, said, the reason why this is all happening to you is because of the Jews, and not only the Jews, but the people uh, the, there were of all color, and they were different religions, and anybody that was not Aryan. He wanted to cleanse Germany, and the disabled. He wanted Jehovah's Witnesses. All of these people, he
Oh,
wanted to cleanse them.
Catholics, everybody was subject to these horrible movements.
Everybody
Yeah,
was, everybody was, but especially the Jews.
yeah.
And, the hate was rampant. So he targeted them. So now people who had businesses or children who were in school now had to be taken out of there and go to Jewish schools, and their world was imploding. There were horrible signs everywhere, and ridicule, and then mobs and killing. And so Otto Frank took his little family out of his beloved Frankfurt. They had to ultimately end up going into hiding. It's a long story, but he went into hide. They went into hiding above. He had established a spice factory and preserve factory in Holland, in Amsterdam, and behind that, up above that, there was an apartment, and he asked four of the office workers, "Would you help us? Would you help us hide?" Especially his assistant, Meep Geese. Quite an it's an extraordinary story, and even though I've told it millions of times, I've learned so much more about them individually and about this story and what courage and love and loyalty looks like. And these people sacrificed their lives. They were all non-Jews for Otto Frank, and ultimately there were eight of them with Otto and the family in this apartment hidden upstairs of this spice factory. And that's where Anne was. She was 13 years old. On her birthday, she was given a red checked diary. And during that time while they were in hiding, which was about 2 years and 1 month, she wrote. She observed them, and it was funny and it was frustrating. And you can imagine being locked up with a teenager. If any of you have had teenagers, to me that's hell. I love them so much, but oh my God. So she wrote about them all. Nobody ever knew what she wrote. She was very private. And then when her little book was filled up, Meep would bring her notebooks, so she would fill up those notebooks, and it got her to be able to write, and she expressed herself beyond anything. When you read it, you can't believe this is a teenager. It's like she grew up before our eyes from 13 years old to 15. That's all she lived. They were captured. The story is very, very tragic. At the end of the war, and all of them perished except for Otto Frank. And so now you cut to my involvement in this. By the time he was convinced that he should publish her writings, which was very difficult for him to do, but she said, "I want to go on living even after my death," and he wanted to honor his daughters after, his beautiful daughter. And so it became a play, and then these talent scouts were all over the country looking to audition young girl who looked like Anne at 12, and I was one of them. So I was handpicked by a talent scout. "Would you like to come to 20th Century Fox and audition?" Uh, yeah, yeah, I'll
You
do it.
think?
Yeah, you think? It was Southern California. I wanted to be an actor, a dancer, and all of that. I auditioned. Of course, I didn't get the part. Millie Perkins got it, and she did a beautiful job. But I found out. I said, "Is Otto Frank still alive?" And they said, "Yes, he's alive. He's in Basel, Switzerland. Could I write to him?" "Yes." And they gave me his address.
What motivated you to reach out to him?
I fell in love with him. To me, I love my father was a good man. My parents were loving people, but I wanted much more from my father. My father was a businessman. He was sort of not present in my life the way I wanted him to be. And now as an adult, I understand it much clearly. But as a child, I I envied the relationship Anne had with Otto Frank. Of course, he was in hiding with them, so he could be with them 100%. He was their teacher. He taught Anne and Margaret and Peter every day. He was patient and loving, this beautiful man, and I adored him. He was a father figure I wanted, and I wanted to reach. I didn't know my grandparents, uh, except for my one grandma who I adored, but I never knew grandfathers, and so I wanted to confide in him. I sort of like adopted him. Then when his first letter was, "Thank you very much. I can't continue writing. I write to a lot of people." And I wrote back, "It's okay, Mr. Frank. You don't have to write to me. I'm just going to write to you." So basically, he realized this kid's not going away. So, and he began writing to me along with his second wife, Fritzi, who became like a grandmother to me. He met her coming back with her daughter from the camps. And she was huge presence in my life as well. But it was that and he was so loving and patient and kind. Nothing that I said, when I look back at the letters that I wrote, they're embarrassing, like, "Oh, I can't believe that," but he just answered me with this sweetness of, "I understand how you feel about blah blah blah." And there were some turning, very transformative letters, one in particular I'll tell you about, but um, that really changed my life. He was what I couldn't get over was that this was a man who lost everybody, his beautiful daughters that he loved more than anybody in the whole world, and yet he was the man who gave me hope. Huge presence.
Talk a little bit about how your friendship with Otto changed your life.
Um, as I say, I'll say that there were many letters. They were funny. There were, things I would always send him things. I would send him a T-shirt, and he said, "Thank you, but I don't wear T-shirts." He was a very cultured man. But it was in the '60s when the Vietnam War was going on. There were race riots, and then Kennedy and King assassinations. I never thought I would live to see our president being killed and Martin Luther King Jr., who I adored. And then when Robert Kennedy,
Yeah.
President Kennedy's brother, was killed, that's it. I lost hope. And I wrote to Otto, I said, "I don't know why you have so much hope for the world. I have none. I'll never bring a child into a world this cruel. I cannot." And he wrote back this beautiful letter to me and said, "Cara, even if you believe the end of the world would be imminent, you still plant a tree today. You cannot give up hope." This man who lost everybody and everything in his life, a Holocaust survivor, is telling me not to give up hope. And then a few months later, for my birthday, I received a card from him, from Otto Frank, that said 2 trees had been planted in my name from Otto Frank. Well, he knew that would get to me because to me, nature is everything to me. Trees, everything. To the idea that trees are living and being planted. And I tell everybody, metaphorically and realistically and really, plant. When you are feeling the worst in the whole world, go outside in nature like you and I have been talking, Pat.
Yeah.
Plant, either really plant or get out there in a garden or just breathe life. That meant more to me than anything in the world. And I tell that to others. Even you might feel you're at the point of despair. Go outside and breathe and plant whatever you need to plant, physically, mentally, spiritually. But don't stop growing. Don't stop hoping because there's always something. And I know, I'm telling you this because sometimes I feel like a hypocrite. It's basically, it's hard for me to believe in hope when I fall into an abyss of, oh, the world is suffering so greatly. Um, I have to focus in and say, what am I hopeful about? What gives me hope? And that helps me.
I have a daily gratitude practice, and I find that is really helpful as well.
Yes. And what is yours? How do you just
Every morning, I meditate, and I find 5 things, they have to be different every day, 5 things that I'm grateful for.
I love that. I love that. I'm
It sets a
similar.
tone for the day, and I think that we all have the opportunity to look at the glass as being half full or half empty,
Mhm.
and it's always refillable. So what do you choose?
Absolutely. We just came back from being I'm in Colorado and surrounded by, we had to see the aspens and it was
Yeah.
so extraordinary. But I do the same. It's like a walking meditation. We walk every day, my husband and I, and with our dog. And I say the same thankful things that I'm thankful about. And as I'm saying them, it it sort of clicks me into place.
Well, I think nature just the aware being in nature nurtures that. I
Yeah,
think it's something that we all really should try to put into our routines as much as possible. I find a transcendent truth and peace in nature that I it's very hard to find anywhere else.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I find. You can have counselors and therapists and teachers, and they're all wonderful. They offer something, but nothing has ever done what it does for me being out in nature. And I don't even have to consciously think about it. I feel it. I feel a comfort. I feel like I'm being
And
hugged.
and that's why it's so, powerful is that it's experiential. You're not
Yes,
thinking it or reading it. You're actually experiencing it. And I think when we experience things, that's how we learn and that's how we grow.
that's exactly right. I thank God for my senses, eyesight and touch and taste and smelling and feeling. And so when we were walking along there, I'm breathing in this breath of nature, and it was just, by the time we were finished with our walk, it was like, "Now what was I upset about?" It's gone, you know?
Well,
It's
it's
there.
focusing in on what matters to you. And if you decide that nature is what matters, that will determine the path you take that day.
That's right. That's right. That's right, and the lessons that nature teaches all the time.
What are some of your favorite nature lessons?
Um, there's so many of them. There's so many of them. But I have this book called Strength from Nature. But I remember sitting and watching a spider weaving her web, and I was just it was a work of art. First of all, I mean, it was just beautiful to watch. And I thought, you can rip up that web. Wind would come through. Somebody can lob it up. They'll get. She'd start right over again. There was a renewal. It's like the spider I know was not going to go, well, oh, well, I give up. No, she's conditioned to start her web over again. And I learned to not give up. Writing is rewriting. Whatever you do, start it over again. Okay, maybe it's not working this way. Uh, what if you tried another angle? What if you tried another perspective? But don't give up. From trees, I learn constantly. From the aspen, there are this gorgeous groves that go forever, and yet they're united by one root, which
Isn't
always
that amazing?
it is really it's the way I wish life would be. I am a we are all one person. I don't see us at any difference, religion, any way. We're all one, and someday we're going to understand and go, oh, what was all this fighting about? We're all one. You look at these aspens and they're breathtaking, and they go on and on and on, and they dance and they wave, and they just sparkle, and they're united by this one root. Um, I mean, I could talk to you forever about everything I'm learning from nature, but to me, it's resilience. And terrible things that are happening in Helene, and you see people that are
Yeah.
suffering terribly. Mother Nature can be very brutal and very beautiful. The same sun that can warm you and keep you cozy and save your life can also boil you and burn you to death. So there's a balance in everything. There's not, none of us get away guaranteed we're not going to be suffer in some way. But how we
Well,
suffer, it's not what we carry, it's how we carry it.
absolutely. For years, I flew sailplanes, gliders,
Did
essentially,
you?
high performance gliders, yeah. And out of that, I really developed a very deep respect for nature.
Hmm.
Nature is so huge and powerful. And up in the air, you're dealing with these invisible sources of lift that take you up and pull you down. It's such a metaphor for life in so many ways. And I think that that metaphor that we can find in nature is something that helps us gain some perspective of our life.
Very much so. I mean, I remember years ago, I went white water rafting, and I really loved it. We've done it
That's
recently, but
fun.
it's so much fun. But I remember the guide said to me, "Don't hold on real tight, because if you do, you're going to be dumped. You have to let go and trust the ride." Of course, I held on tight. I was dumped, and they they had to drag me out, and plop me in the boat, and I got okay. I know what you're saying now. So I had to trust the ride, and it was wild. It was a wild ride. Um, but I trusted the sense that I was going to get through it. And then it went through this very quiet, peaceful, beautiful, no sound eddy, but in the distance, I could hear the rapids. And so, it continues on this continuum of life. You asked me what I've learned is water is off but I've learned so much from the rivers. When I remember running to the river and sitting down and saying, I hate change. Why does change have to happen? Why do people have to leave? Why do I have to move? Why does this happen to him? And can it just be the way it always is? Or, why does change have to happen? And I've studied it, even our own skin is shedding continually, and I sat by the river and think, this river looks the same always to me. And then I looked at the river closely, and it was changing every second. There was a stick that would go around, a rock that would go over this. It would change before my eyes. Nothing remains the same. And that's a huge lesson for me. Not one I like, but it's a huge one.
I think we need to learn to live outside our comfort zones as much as possible because
Right.
then change is incremental and it's manageable. But if we resist change, the pressure builds up and until something has to give. And that cataclysmic change is much more difficult to manage.
Absolutely. It's how we adjust. And it is a matter of just adjusting. Oh, this horrible thing has happened. Now what do I do? How do I change my perspective or my life according to what is happening or what has just happened? And I am so in awe of people who would do that with grace. I mean, I don't know. I pray I'm not tested the way a lot of people are tested, but I'm sort of like a survivor junkie. People who survive against the worst odds, and yet they come out on the other side in order to teach us what it looks like. Uh, I'm in awe of them. I'm in awe of them, and I need to learn from them all the time. And I try to. I really try to because they are there all around us. I consider them angels. And that goes for animals. They teach us more than we can even believe. You look at them, how they survive, what they do against all odds.
Speaking of animals, I once had 2 cats. One cat, Chauncey, this big white, mostly Himalayan cat, was a rescue cat. And I brought him into my house, and Miss Margaret, my other cat, hated him. Absolutely hated him. The hate in my house was so awful, I didn't never wanted to go home until one day, Chauncey had some sort of neurologic failure, and he just fell, and he couldn't move, and, of course, I rushed to the vet, I'm crying. The vet has me leave him overnight. I go and I pick him up the next day, and he's okay. I'm wondering if maybe it was a spider bite or something that would have some sort of toxin in it. But anyway, I bring him back home, and all of a sudden, Miss Margaret has decided that maybe he's okay.
Ah,
But that cat handled every bump in his road with love. That is the one thing he taught me. No matter what, no matter how much Miss Margaret hated him, no matter what happened, he handled it with love. And that is such a powerful lesson to learn from one of your animals.
it's really, I hope you write about that. Have you written about that?
I've written a short piece I have on a blog. I could write a book about Chauncey and Miss Margaret actually and their
That's
antics.
that in itself is a children's book,
Yeah, it really is. There's so many good stories.
aren't
And
they?
I think stories have a lot of purpose.
Hmm.
You were talking about the spider before. That spider, his purpose is to weave that web.
Hmm.
We all need purpose. How do humans find that kind of resolute purpose that we all need and we all lose at times?
We do. We really do. And I always ask myself, well, I'm feeling stuck right now. Where am I going? And I go back to why am I here? What is my purpose? Um, some people believe this is all just a accident. It's whatever it is. I'm not one of those. I believe we sign on to do something, learn something to help our souls evolve. And many times it's not for we bring in people who are maybe not good for us or we seem that way, and yet they are teachers, um, help our souls evolve. So I find that helps me go back to, so what did I sign up for? Why am I here?
Well, and I think humans learn I did a podcast recently on duality, non-duality, and
Hmm.
humans learn through duality, hot, cold, dark, light.
Hmm.
We learn by comparing our experiences with things. And the more radical our experiences, I think when we bounce back, the more radical the range of understanding we walk away with.
Hmm.
But sometimes that in between really tests us. You know,
It does.
what are we doing? What my daily mantra, what am I supposed to learn?
Hmm. It's a beautiful mantra. Absolutely, because now you're a student, you're not a victim. And that is, and I hate the word victim. I love the fact if you're going to learn something, now you're studying it. This is part of your Earth 101. whatever we want to call this. Why are we here? What am I
Oh,
supposed to learn?
I hope I'm beyond 101. Could I
Oh
be at
man,
201, please?
I pray I don't want to do this thing again. I don't.
No,
But
no.
please no. I say, can I have recess now, please?
Earlier before we got on, we were talking about the art of letter writing,
Right. Yes.
and it is an art, and it's something. Explain what letter writing is and was and what it means or what it meant, because it's really, not something we engage in anymore.
No, it is really, really not. And I love that you're asking and talking about that, Pat, because when I speak to students, this, usually middle school, high school, especially I'll say, when I first wrote a letter to Otto Frank. Wait a minute. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say a letter? Do you know what a letter is? Do you know what a stamp is? Do you know what a typewriter is? Do you know what paper is? And so of course they laugh. I said it's takes patience. It's all about patience. You know, um, if you write to somebody, first of all, if you write to somebody even now, you may not get a response. Whether you're looking for a job or writing to somebody to say, I ask you your forgiveness, you may not get it back. But the purpose of that writing, the trajectory is you. It's for yourself. I'm writing this letter. I may not hear from this person ever, but it makes me feel better about myself to write this letter. I'm sorry. I'm introducing myself. I would love to, whatever, and it may go off to the ethers. Know that if you took the courage to begin that, to even write it, pat yourself on the back. So a letter to me is it's a beautiful form of communication that unfortunately we've even lost conversation in this day and age.
Yeah.
We're all looking at our phones. The children can't have conversations the way unless you really take the phones away and say, let's talk. Let's really talk because it's talking in a different way. You are communicating. You're using your mind. I know that when I write, I feel at home. I can express myself in a way that I usually can't as good as I can when I'm writing. But letter writing is an art form, pen pals, reaching out to each other. You know how excited you get when you get a greeting card with somebody writing on it. You get to see their handwriting, part of their personality, who they are. There's,
The
there's an
type of paper. I mean, there's the international paper that you used to use when you sent something to somebody, say, in Europe. It was very thin and fine and
That's
kind of
right.
blue tinted
That's right.
versus, a card versus an invitation. I
Right.
mean, the pens that you use, there's so many elements that go into creating a letter that
That's right.
it's really fascinating when you think about it. And while email is great, messaging is great, I hope we don't lose that art of letter writing.
Oh, I pray not. I pray not. And even my own letters, goes back to just about 2 years ago. I had received a message from a retired FBI agent who's now become a very dear friend, Vince Van Koch, and he said, "We would like to analyze your early letters to Otto Frank." And he couldn't tell me why or what it was for, but would I entrust them and send them off to Europe, which was like registered, and I'm going, oh, everybody was holding their breath. But it turned out to be an extraordinary experience. They analyzed those letters.
What did they find?
It was the font, the type that Otto Frank used it involved the betrayer. And it's a whole different discussion. But they were looking at the typewriter, the font that he used to write somebody's name. It's in Sullivan's what's her name? Sullivan's book, Who Betrayed Anne Frank, and it's beautiful, beautiful book. And Vince Pancoke talked to Rosemary Sullivan. She wrote a beautiful book. There's a lot of controversy about the betrayer, and we need even go into that because we all have our own theories. But Vince has a very convincing. He did a lot of work as an investigator, and so part of that was involving the letters. Uh, So it's quite a story. It's each time I think I've done and done, there's something else that surfaces. Um, where that came from, how that came from, and how they're still looking into all these things. That's where you get to what really matters. Why does it matter? What is the purpose of that?
I find it fascinating, actually, that somebody who was 16 years old back in the 40s has her influence has been great, period, but it's been very great in your life. It just transcends time. And actually, I think a lot of all of our communication these days is data driven.
Right.
It's all data, whether it's video or audio or whatever. And yet, though those um, events, video, audio, will live longer than us. They
That's
will
right.
live beyond us, just as Anne Frank's diaries did. And it's just fascinating to me to see how, through generations, some types of literature really never lose their power.
They never do. They never do. And again, it goes back to the purpose. If you're living your purpose lives on. It never dies. And I don't believe even in death you die. Your essence, you pass it on to the next generation, whether they are your children or your students or your friends or family or people who are reading your books, whatever. What you're talking about, Pat. What am I supposed to learn? What am I learning? How can I pass this along? What am I supposed to do here? And can that help you on your journey?